All right, new at 6, keeping Milwaukee accountable for racial equity. The Common Council unanimously passed the resolution today, which will identify issues facing communities of color. Sean Gallagher shows us how this effort has hopes to change the stigma of Milwaukee being the worst city for African Americans.
Racial equity audits are more like assessments, checking to see how the city's operating through an equity lens to see what they're doing well so they can try and replicate it in other parts of the city, and also identifying some areas where there's room for improvement.
This is a priority for the city, and that they recognize the importance of this moment.
Nikki Purvis leads the city's efforts in advancing racial equity and inclusion. She says this assessment will hold those in charge accountable and could change the perception of Milwaukee as being the worst city in the country for African Americans, according to a study by UWM.
This is, again, making sure that we're not just committing verbally, but we are actually holding ourselves accountable by looking at our internal policies.
It's definitely important to look at what we are doing and what we're not doing that we need to be doing.
Alderwoman Malele Coggs sponsored the resolution calling for the audits.
The goal is to try to catch the gaps and the biases that may exist department to department so that some level of change and a measurement of accountability can be implemented for long-range change.
But how do you audit for racial equity? Inspector Rhonda Kohlheim says it starts with viewing the city as an organization rather than just a government entity.
How is racial equity reflected internally in the city's governance, their language communications, the policies, the culture, our operations and practices?
Kohlheim says they'll be talking with all employees and assessing all city departments, giving updates to the Common Council every 3 months.
It's only going to better the city of Milwaukee as an organization and in turn hold us accountable for not just saying what we plan to do, but this is what the city is actually doing. We are moving forward.
It's always good to have an external perspective or a third eye looking at what you do.
Purvis and Kohlheim are framing their audit with the help of the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, which has over 80 different jurisdictions doing the same thing across the country. But this will just be the first step, because pointing out the issues is just half the battle.
We just have to put some action behind it, and that's the only way we're going to be able to create some change. So I am hopeful that this audit will point out some areas for improvement.
It took generations for the city to get as segregated as it is and to have the systemic issues that it has. And it will probably take many years for us to undo all of that. But there first must be an intentional, collaborative effort to undo it.
The Office of Equity and Inclusion will create the parameters for these audits over the course of the next 6 months, and we should expect our first results by fall. In Milwaukee, Sean Gallagher, TMJ4 News.